Hello, I'm Eric Devereaux. Welcome to this series of videos regarding my textbook, Methods of Policy Analysis, Creating and Deploying and Assessing Theories of Change. Now in its second edition. The textbook is available to you for free, and I'm posting a link in the description below, but you can use to access the textbook as a PDF file. I'm giving the textbook away for free in part because I want to promote its use, and in part because this second edition is in need of a revision to a third edition to correct some issues, which this series of videos eventually will touch on. Some of the issues are pretty trivial, just having to do with some changes in political structures since the book was originally published. But there is one really significant issue in the book which I have to revise, which is a discussion of a particular public policy matter, which subsequently science has substantially overturned the views that I have advocated in this book, and I have to reflect that in a future edition. Anyway, a little bit of history here. I originally began teaching public policy analysis at Carnegie Mellon University quite a long time ago now. And when I was hired to teach there, I became a colleague of Professor Pat Larkey. He's now retired subsequently. And Pat was teaching a course called Methods of Policy Analysis at Carnegie Mellon's Heinz College for a very long time, and took me under his wing and trained me to teach the course in his stead, which I did at different times, and sort of introduced me to the world of public policy analysis from a perspective I had never encountered before, coming out of a PhD program in political science. And I discovered I tremendously enjoyed the teaching. Subsequently, many years later, when I was hired to teach at American University School of Public Affairs, I began teaching some of the same content. And eventually it occurred to me I should turn it into a book. Pat gave me his permission to turn it into a book on my own, which I did. And although I thank him in the introduction to the book for his efforts to train me in this field, he didn't want to continue working on the subject matter in retirement and gave me permission to write the book. And now it's in its second edition. The book has been used at American University. It's also been used at Georgetown University's McCourt School of Public Policy, and also at the University of Illinois Chicago Department of Public Policy Management and Analytics. And I think it's reasonably successful at endowing students in master's programs in public affairs, public administration, public policy, with some skills to make immediate contributions as public policy analysts. I've been relatively satisfied with the ability of the book to do that, and I hope that if you go through the book, take your time to learn what it has to teach you, that you also might find it increases your skills as a public policy analyst. This first video in the series is just going to look at the first chapter of the book, a chapter in which I address some fundamental issues in public policy analysis. So I'm going to change my screen sharing, and I'm going to share a device that allows me to draw for you, which you now should be seeing on your screen, which will allow me to draw some pictures for you as we go along here, as I talk about the content that's in the first chapter of the book, which is fundamentally about just what is the nature of public policy analysis, what do public policy analysts do. One of the points that the first chapter makes, and I know some students find this very imposing, is that a public policy analyst in the United States is simply someone who has something to say about public policy that someone else is willing to pay to hear. I wish it was more profound than that, but truthfully, in the United States, there's no particular certification that gives you the properties of being a public policy analyst. There's training that can make you a better public policy analyst, in my view. And that's the type of training I've been involved with my entire career. But as the book points out, there are other people who are actively recognized as successful public policy analysts, influential public policy analysts, who do not have any particular training or education that you would think that would put them in that position, but there they are. But for most of us, in order to be recognized as useful public policy analysts, we have to have some training and education in the field that we can bring to bear on issues of public policy. So first and foremost, let's talk about what public policy analysis is as a functioning profession. So generally, a public policy analyst is brought in when there is some circumstance in our world, which I'll call condition A, which has been recognized by somebody, someone, some institution, as being problematic, as having features that are not desirable, and that there would be a real effort or impetus to try to transition from condition A over to condition B. B is seen as somehow an improvement on A, worth transitioning to. So there's several things that public policy analysts get involved with. One is trying to figure out exactly what is wrong with A. What are the features of A that need to be addressed and in some way remediated? And then coming up with a B. What is the condition B that you would like to go to? And how are you going to make that transition? Okay. And the book says that my definition, or the definition in the book of a public policy, is an application of resources of some form that constitutes this bridge from condition A to condition B. And public policy analysts are looking forward and saying, if we use that application of resources, that is what the public policy will be. We will go from A to B with reliable certainty. We have a good chance of getting from condition A to condition B. That is what we're trying to do. So the application of resources is what we'll describe here as our public policy. Uh, the book also then talks about something really important, which is perspective. Perspective refers to the different understandings and views that participants in the public policy process have of our world and of public policies that might change our world. And from the standpoint of being a public policy analyst, perhaps a consultant in the field or working inside an organization, perspective has a huge impact on what you do, because just a fundamental reality is that across the public policy landscape, different individuals, different organizations, different interests have different perspectives on the issues, different perspectives on the condition of the world as it is now, different goals for what the world might look like in the future. There has been an extensive search by academic economists and others to try to come up with some universal perspective, a perspective that cuts across all people, all places, perhaps all times, where everyone would agree that condition B is better than condition A, or that there are aspects of condition A that are universally problematic and seen as problematic. And the reality of this is that those efforts have failed. Instead, they've gone in the other direction and shown that there is no universal perspective that everyone would agree gives us a viewpoint on public policy, that a common platform for understanding. It just doesn't exist. You can go into and read about this yourself. My book does not go into great detail about this, but some very, very influential economists have delved deeply into the problems associated with trying to find what they sometimes call a universal social welfare function, or something along those lines, in which you can plug in aspects of our world and get answers that everyone would agree to about what is good and what is bad. It doesn't exist. There is no universal welfare function. There is no universal perspective. And perspective has a huge impact on, what to care about, why to care about particular issues in public policy, how to address issues, and what to do. Clients or bosses or organizations will have different views about what constitute the problems of the day, what needs to be worked on and why, how to address those issues, and what to do if you decide to do something. And so perspective is almost everything when it comes to the foundations of public policy analysis. You have to understand the perspectives that are involved in order to be effective in doing public policy analysis work. And as I've said to my students on many occasions, if you encounter perspectives that you don't personally agree with for whatever reasons you have, then it's probably the best choice to not work for those organizations or those individuals. There certainly are public policy analysts who are like hired guns and go from town to town and do whatever anybody's willing to pay them to do. And that's just a reality as well. But if that's not you, you need to be very careful about the perspectives you sign on to at the time you take a job or you agree to work for a client as a consultant. Something else you can see about here is that uh, public policy analysis is a clinical profession. In its core, it is a clinical profession. We diagnose something about the world that is not working according to the determination of whatever perspective we're coming from. We treat the problem through some application resources, through a public policy, and then we assess the results to see whether or not we actually have cured or to some degree improved the situation. Okay? And so this is sort of what is essentially at the core involved with public policy analysis. Clinically, we diagnose, we treat, and we assess the consequences of what we have done. In trying to shift the world from a condition A to a condition B, where in terms of the perspective we have adopted, B is superior to A. And as I said before, but I want to emphasize again here, public policy analysts are looking forward into the future. They're making claims about the consequences of actions that have yet to be taken. Those claims go along the lines of we are in a situation which we think is not as good as it should be. We want to move to a better condition, one that from our perspective we would see as an improvement. And here is the application resources we are advocating to get there. And here is why we believe there is a reasonable likelihood of success. Now, if you look at what goes on in public policy analysis, what you find is that things are more complicated than just the actions of a particular organization. The world has a lot of tricky components going along in it, okay? And as the book talks about in the first chapter, I'm going to draw that diagram for you now. Um, uh, we have a situation where we start out by recognizing a problem. We have problem recognition. Problem recognition is a fundamental component of all public policy making, of agenda setting, of focusing attention of a wide range of institutions on an issue, okay? And then we have a search process, right? Right? We find a solution. We advocate for and we find a solution. And then we have a political process where we approve that solution, right? In other words, we make policy, right? And then we have to implement that solution. We have an implementation process, right? And this is where we actually use resources to do something in the world. This is our policy design. This is the actual use of the resources to implement the policy. And then we get a result, okay? Because of doing that, we get an outcome. And that outcome may or may not be what we desired because of something we cannot always control, which is in addition to all of this very intentional effort, there are other factors involved. And those other factors can overwhelm everything that we have tried to do, just a fact of life. And then in the political process, we have a constituency reaction. The constituency reacts to what it is we've done, and that may feed right back into the next round of problem recognition. So policy analysts have a huge role to play here. They have often a very important role to play here. And sometimes they influence constituency reactions through the process of policy evaluation. We also recognize that there are linkages inside here among all these different components that happen. And for example, constituencies can react to the policy design process, even if they don't react to the implementation process. Um, but I just want to again emphasize that in the world of policy and analysis and the work that we do as analysts, these other factors that can come to play can overwhelm all of our efforts and can make it difficult or impossible to achieve our goals. And that is why often when we talk about looking into the future and using resources to address an issue to try to solve a problem, we in fact are making probabilistic statements that if everything else goes as we intend, we should be able to get there. Okay. And that is just a reality we have to deal with in terms of making probabilistic statements about the future. The last thing I'm just going to point out in this lecture, something that I think is very important for all policy analysts who are starting out in their careers to recognize, is that we have to address theories of truth. Policy analysts want to make claims about what is happening in the world, and this addresses this has to do with making claims about what is true. What do we believe is true? And there are four sources of truth. And the most important one of all for a policy analyst should be correspondence, which is we say something is true because we can find evidence of it, measurable evidence in the world that we can say here is proof that what we are saying is true, in the sense of being able to measure something reliably again and again and again. Other people can go and measure it and get the same results. And we all agree that it is true because it corresponds to things we can measure in the world. The second reason that we say something is true is because it is coherent. There is coherence. It is logical, right? So correspondence is about evidence, and coherence is about logic and theory. And of course, what is the best is when something is both corresponds to what we can measure in the world and is coherent in terms of our logic and theory. This helps to reinforce the idea that we have a good sense of what is true in the world. There are unfortunately two other versions of truth that are very active in our field. Consensus is a huge factor. What it is experts say is true, what it is the public believes is true, widely believes to be true, can have a major impact on what people actually believe is true. And if you look back at the COVID-19 pandemic and everything that unfolded with the COVID-19 pandemic, you can see that consensus played a significant role, a life and death role, actually, in whether people sought vaccination or took steps to prevent themselves from getting infected, or took being somebody who had a COVID infection seriously, and it could even impact whether they lived or died or other people around them did. And then we have probably the most pernicious and most unpleasant version of truth, cash value. The cash value theory of truth is that I will say what is true because I am rewarded for saying it. And we happen to live in an era right now where cash value versions of truth are rampant everywhere. On the internet, claims about health and treatments for health or nutrition or a wide range of other issues. We see people saying things and advocating things predominantly because it's really benefiting them financially. Whether there's correspondence or coherence or even consensus it does not seem to be as important. And it's very disturbing, but it is a version of truth that must be respected as powerful in the world of policy analysis. So that's an overview of the first chapter of my book. I hope you'll read the book, starting with the first chapter, and it'll benefit you. There'll be subsequent videos you can look at to go through all of the other chapters in detail. Until then, thank you for watching this video. I appreciate your attention to it, and look forward to you following this series. Bye now.